I am theoretically hosting this panel, which means I will say a few things and then let the other people tell you what's going on with pitchers to target. The main idea here is we want to talk about pitchers that you might be able to use this year, not just super far down the road who's going to be good, but who's going to be good soon. Joining me today, I think most of you probably know most of these people who contribute some right here to this very site at Pitcher List. Over on the side, I don't know if you're right to left the same as mine. Martin Sekulski is a dynasty writer here at Pitcher List and writes his own platform for some fantasy on Substack. Hello, Martin. I'm kind of meeting most of these guys for the first time. We chatted a little bit. I'm glad your names are under you. Otherwise, I would have just been totally lost. Matt Heckman in the middle here, dynasty team manager here at Pitcher List and writer at Fantrax. And then Jack Mueller, graduate student at Miami, the Ohio version of Miami University, the good Miami. If you're wondering, if you're keeping track, that is correct, right? You're at the good.
Yeah, I'm at the Ohio version.
Good, that is the good one. Where he is the correspondent for Riverfront U, and he contributes here at Pitcher List as a member of the Dynasty team. So all these guys know about Dynasty pitching. So excited to dig into this. So before we just start like throwing a bunch of names around, which is what we're going to do, I wanted to ask a couple general sort of background questions about evaluating pitching prospects, either for the long term or for the near term. Essentially, if each of you guys would tell me, like, what do you look at when you're evaluating someone who has no major league experience or a very limited amount? Are you relying on scouting reports? Do you do your own scouting? Like, you go out and watch video on these guys? Are you looking at stats? If you're looking at stats, how do you look at minor league numbers differently than you would look at major league numbers? Essentially, what goes into your deciding this guy's good? Let me start with Jack, if you would.
Yeah, sure. I think in my opinion, I tend to look at stats mixed in with my own scouting that I like, the eye test. If I feel like a guy has good stuff that elevates them in my eyes, as well as I would hope that they have good like rate stats, which means like strikeout rate and walk rate. I don't put too much stock in like ERA or WHIP at the minor league level, because I think everything kind of fluctuates so much with how much travel there is, how much fluctuation there is between levels. So if a guy has good strikeout and walk rates that are consistent over all of his stops, and it's mixed with the eye test that he has the stuff that could put him into like the top caliber of pitching prospects, I think that's kind of how I go through my process.
Perfect.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what Jack was saying. Like, the strikeout and walk rates, I think, are the biggest two indicators. I like to look at home runs too. I mean, that's a little bit more case dependent. There are obviously some very hitter friendly or pitcher friendly ballparks, as in the major leagues and the minor leagues. So that doesn't always work, but I think that gives a good idea on command in the zone. If a pitcher throws a lot of strikes, that can be a great thing if their walk rate's low. But then if they're giving up a lot of home runs, it means they're throwing too many strikes, which major league hitters are going to kind of punish even more. And then kind of going off of that, it becomes the eye test for me. So like, it's almost twofold. You start with the stats and it's like, okay, this guy has a really good strikeout rate, but then when I watch him, he looks all over the place, or he isn't commanding it well. Or, I mean, you could go the opposite end too. There's a pitcher that I happened to glance at when I was watching a hitter prospect, say when I was trying to find video, and I'm like, wow, his stuff looks really good, or his command looks really good, or he looks like a real athlete on the mound. So I think stats are important, but it's also passing that eye test to kind of be like, yes, this guy has what it takes to be a major league pitcher, as opposed to just strictly looking at stats or strictly just watching somebody on the mound.
Yeah, I kind of echo all that as well. Statistically, Jack covered everything. Statistically, I'm looking for when I'm watching a pitcher in person, I'm looking for build. Trying to get somebody that's got a little bit more durability in their body. I'm looking for mechanics that are repeatable. I'm looking for consistency and poise on the mound, regardless of the situation. And then beyond that, I'm really just looking for arsenal depth and the quality of what they're offering. If they've got a 2-pitch mix, if they got a 3-pitch mix, just trying to look and see if they've got the carrying tools to be a potential starter in the long run, or if they're going to have a reliever risk if they're only a 2-pitch guy, or, if they do have 3 pitches, if only one of them is serviceable and the other 2 are just kind of get me over. Those type of things are the things I'm looking at when I'm evaluating pitchers.
Yeah, I really want to echo that to the pitch mix. I feel like one of the things I look at when I'm watching somebody is how do they attack the opposite-handed batter, whether it's a righty dropping in a changeup to a lefty, or a lefty dropping a changeup or a curveball or something like that. Because at the major league level, if you have a big platoon split, other opposing teams stack their lineups specifically against you. If you're a lefty, you're going to face a lot of righties if you struggle against righties. If you're a righty, you're going to face a lot of lefties if you struggle against lefties. And so I feel like you can kind of breeze through, especially the lower levels of the minor leagues, without needing to worry about that too much, like what Martin said. If you have that one fastball or you have one slider, kind of, that's going to really carry you. Whereas as you start facing tougher competition, I feel like it's going to be more and more difficult to get by without having a true out pitch for somebody that bats on the opposite side of the plate.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's something I've picked up on the last few years, like started trying to pay attention to. It's one of those things I know matters, but I don't know how to know that it matters. When you see these guys, a lot of guys with numbers at like single A and double A that look like probably the greatest pitcher of all time. And then it drops a little bit at triple A and they go in the majors and they're terrible. And then you look and they go, oh, he throws a fastball like all the time. It's just so good that it gets the single A hitters out. So, and that's one of those, I rely on other people to tell me their pitch mix. Like that's why I was curious, who actually is watching these guys. Like I don't have the time to watch tape of people at double A, but I sure want to know. I want somebody to tell me, yeah, this guy has a good slider too, or something like that. So another sort of general question there's no correct answer to this. And it's going to be different for everyone. But like when we're talking about rookie pitchers, guys who are not going to start in the majors at the beginning of the year, how deep of a league do you have to be playing in before you're going to draft a guy who probably won't pitch till May or maybe June? Like short of a Paul Skeens, like I'm not going to consider drafting someone who's not in the majors in a 12-team mixed league. Personally, that I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's for me. 15-team mixed, maybe something like a draft champions league. You can draft a bunch of these guys. I'm just curious if you guys have any sort of guidelines. Like in this league, I'm willing to put 3 young pitchers on my bench. In this league, kind of like I won't draft anyone.
I feel like it probably depends on the bench size. I mean, for me, like personally, if I have a deeper bench and I have places I can stash people, I have no problem doing that because the upside that some of these prospects possess, I think, is a lot higher than some of the other options that are on the board around where they're going. But if it's a shallow bench in a shallow league, if it's a 10-team league, if it's a 12-team league with only a handful of bench slots, I don't really try and target. I'm kind of with you, Dave. I don't try and target any of them as hard as that is. I feel like we all write on the dynasty team, and it's like I want to accumulate as many prospects as I possibly can because there are guys I've been watching for 3 years at this point, 4 years at this point, come through the system. And it's like, I want to call my shot. I want to be the guy who has the next, I'll throw Paul Skeens out there, even though he was going plenty early in drafts last year. I want to have all those prospects where it's not necessarily the most beneficial move, I feel like, because I don't know, you run out, these guys start or they get hurt, or you're banking on a pitching prospect come up and then they struggle in AAA or something like so many different things can go wrong with, especially pitching prospects, not even hitting prospects, that I feel like I tend to steer away from them in shallower leagues unless I have those bench spots. If I have the bench spots, I'll take any guy I feel passionately about because the upside outweighs, like I can just stash them really easily.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. It's a lot of it's just I'm really risk averse when I'm getting into some of these NFBC style drafts, the 12 and 15 teamers. Your benches are so shallow that you really just can't afford to take a chance on somebody that you're not sure is going to contribute right away. And credit to the people that took Skeens last year. But for every Paul Skeens that comes up, you're going to have people that come up and just get annihilated for 3 months and then 3 starts and then they get sent down for 3 months. So, and generally for me, as a prospect guy, I've gotten burned in the past trying to get too cute with prospects in draft and whole or in shallower rosters, the 15 and the 12 team leagues. But in a draft and hold, I have no problem taking prospects, probably somewhere in like the round 35 and later, just when you're looking for upside at that point. And you're really, if you're going to take a prospect, you really have to be fairly confident they are going to make an appearance at some point this year, or else you're just wasting your roster spot. So,
yeah, I want to echo that. I don't think I'd ever really take a prospect pitcher early outside of the guys like Paul Skeens, just because pitching at the major league level is deep, and like you can find value in guys who are streamers you only put in your lineup for 1 to 2 weeks. And then that upside mixed with the risk that comes with taking prospect pitchers, even if it is a late round flyer, it ends up being kind of a waste of a spot that you can be used to like fill a spot in your rotation should one of your major league guys go down. So I tend to not take pitching prospects in redraft leagues. Obviously dynasty leagues are a whole different story, but unless there's like a generational type prospect, I generally don't take prospect pitching.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Although I think like most of the guys we're going to be talking about are exactly the kind of guys that you need to have so high on your radar that like when they get called up, if they're not on a team, like they should go ahead of any like replacement level pitcher. I did a panel at First Pitch Arizona where I dove into a bunch of numbers as far as 15-team mix sort of as the baseline, and found like the replacement level pitcher and below, like the guys that I stream all the time, trying to figure out basically why my pitching has been horrible for 3 years. And like the guys who are just major league pitchers, just like your fourth and fifth starters who are always in the majors, what they give you is so negative that like any of these good prospects who come up, I think once they're up, I think you should be playing them, taking a shot on them ahead of these mediocre fifth starters. That's kind of where I'm trying to lean in with this. But to start talking about some names, I think I do want to kick it off with, is there somebody that is like needs to be drafted this year? Like, is there a next Paul Skeens? Of course, there's not a next literally best player of all time. Is there the next best Paul Skeens? Is there a guy that you don't question if he's going to be good? You only question how good. And if no one drafts him, you wouldn't let him not get drafted in at least a 15-team mix if you're in it. Who's the guy that you want more than anyone else?
He's on the same team as Paul Skeens.
Yeah.
And Paul Skeens are going to be in the same rotation. Bubba Chandler is such a tier above. I mean, if Andrew Painter, I guess, wasn't coming off of injury, I'd probably put him right in this list. But the Phillies have already come out and said he's not coming up until August. They're going to slow play him. They're not forcing him into the major league rotation. They just acquired Luzardo. There's no reason to push Andrew Painter. And so that really just leaves Bubba Chandler. I mean, I feel like the other thing you have to look at is how are these guys getting to the major leagues? And the Pirates don't. Bailey Falter is going to keep Bubba Chandler in the minor leagues. Johan Oviedo is going to keep Bubba Chandler in the minor leagues. Like, that's not, I don't think that's going to happen. It might happen for a week or two, but Bubba Chandler is the one guy who hasn't been in the major leagues yet that I think needs to be drafted. And then I think Jack and Martin are probably looking like Jackson Job too. And yeah, I forget he's a prospect sometimes because he was already up in the major leagues last year. But those are the two guys, Jackson Job, Bubba Chandler, that I would not leave a draft without. I would draft them in a 12-team league. I'd consider it in a deep bench 10-team league. Those are the two guys where top 10 prospects, frontline stuff, strikeout upside. I would much rather have them than some replacement level pitcher who can eat innings for me in the long run.
Yeah, I think outside of Job and Chandler, it kind of drops to another tier of guys who who are going to be good, but their impact in 2025 may be less so, just because I don't think they're going to make the major leagues until later in the summer. And the two names that stick out to me, just because frankly of the state of the major league situation, are Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz. Both are going to be very good pitchers in my opinion, and the White Sox pitching staff or projected pitching staff is going to be a dumpster fire. So why not give these guys a shot, get them major league experience early, get them a taste of facing major league hitting. Like I dove into their system for pitcher lists I think a couple weeks ago, and I was blown away by both of these guys. Their fastballs are electric, their off speeds are dominant, and they're going to fly through the minor leagues this year. So I don't think they're on the same tier as guys like Chandler and Job, but I think in like a deeper league, if you're looking for a flyer and strikeout upside, those are two guys I'd be looking at.
Yeah, I agree on all those guys. My only caution with Schultz is the White Sox really have no need to rush him. I'm not 100% sure that he'll debut this year. I'd love him to because I've got him on several places, but he only got 115 innings in the minor leagues. I'd be really shocked if they actually called him up for a longer portion of the season than just the final month. Hagen Smith, on the other hand, is a proven workhorse. I could see a path to him getting to the big leagues by early summer for sure. But you did touch on Jackson Jobe a little bit. There's no reason for the Tigers to continue to let him rot in AAA as much as I would love to, because I live 5 minutes from Toledo, so it's fine. I love to see him every fifth day. But really and truly, they don't have any need to keep him down, whether they use him in the bullpen as a bulk reliever or they just go ahead and put him in the rotation right off the bat. There's no reason for Jobe to be down. Two prospects that we will touch on, I'm sure, at some point that are still prospect eligible, Rhett Lauder and Kumar Rocker. I both anticipate both those guys being in the rotation as well on opening day, or Lauder for sure, Rocker possibly. But those are the two guys that I will draft in any size format as well. So
I feel like the upside for any of these guys has to be high enough to warrant kind of going in after them. If I'm not, I mean, I pulled up like the NFC ADP, and Bubba Chandler's going behind Nestor Cortez, Brian Bello, Eric Fetty, like Jesus Luzardo. Luzardo, I guess, has some upside, but all those other guys feel like floor plays or innings eaters or somebody I'm going to stick on the back of my roster. And then when I have to start them, I'm going to groan and roll my eyes and be like, do I really want to start Brian Bello against the New York Yankees? Like, no, I don't really feel good about that. Whereas I could take Bubba Chandler in the same exact spot, and if he comes up, and I think he could become almost as good as Paul Skeens. I don't think he is Paul Skeens. It's very tough to kind of reach that level of production, but I think he's somebody I could slot into my lineup every time he's on the mound and be confident I can get at least replacement level value in a tough start, and I can get really good numbers in a favorable matchup from him.
Yeah. Even though we're talking for this year, is there another name or two that like long term is at that level? You're just not sure if they're coming this year.
Painter.
Yeah, Painter for sure.
And that's just because of the injury.
Yeah. There's no need to rush him, like Matt said. Matt's a Phillies fan. He knows he's in tune with the organization. There's truly no need to rush him. They basically said he's not going to throw it all in spring training. If you look at their affiliates, I'd be surprised if he went anywhere else other than Clearwater, which I think is their high A team, if I'm not mistaken. There's no need to put him in Scranton or in Reading.
They're not putting him in Reading.
There's no reason to put him in cold weather to start the season off. They're truly going to baby him, and I completely understand. He's still 21 years old. He would have made the rotation in 2023 had he not gotten hurt.
He would have made it in 2022 if he hadn't gotten hurt. And then they wasted a year trying to have him rehab. I mean, he is so good.
Yeah, he's going to be a horse. There's no doubt in my mind that Painter's he's my number one pitching prospect. I'm sure everybody's got different opinions on it, but he's definitely a guy that long term he fits the mold. He's as close to Paul Skeens as a pitching prospect as you're going to find.
A guy I'm still kind of high on. I don't think he's going to come up this year, but Chase Burns was electric at Wake Forest and was obviously drafted really high. I don't think he threw to end the season. I don't think he had spent any time. So I think with a strong start or like a strong first season in Pro Bowl, I think he could definitely debut maybe even late 2025, early 2026 would be my guess for him. But like, I think he is going to be a front of the line guy, true ace, and really compete with Loader at the top of that rotation.
Yeah, I agree. He was basically what Lauder was when Lauder was at Wake as well. I mean, they're just the top of the rotation workhorse kind of guys. And if you look at the path that Lauder took, I mean, he started last season in A-ball and then started, he finished the season in the majors. So it's not out of the question for Burns to do that. Now, granted, he didn't throw it all last year, but he was throwing on the backfields. He was throwing it in structs. So it's not like he hasn't been throwing it all, but after the workload he took on at the end of, his senior year at Wake Forest, or his final year at Wake Forest, there was no need to put him on the mound again in the fall. So,
Thomas White, I think, could be up there by the end of next season, the pitching prospect for Miami. Like, there is no chance he debuts next year. So I know that's kind of what this segment's focused on, but he's kind of that one guy because Jack already mentioned Noah Schultz. There is a chance he could come up next year, but Thomas White could follow a very similar, another lefty, in a very similar path. And this time next year, we could be talking about getting in on Thomas White before the Marlins kind of push him up into their rotation.
You guys are doing a good job of this already. I meant to say ahead of time, like when you throw out a name, like say what organization they're with, because a lot of these names, I didn't know who Thomas White was and then you said Miami, and then I looked, okay, Thomas White. And I'm sure there's people listening who know all these names, and people like me, who some of them I had to look. So that's helpful. You guys have mentioned a couple of times Rhett Lauder's name, and I was curious. I kind of want to talk about him as it relates to some other people. When these guys get like super limited innings, I think he made 6 starts for the Reds. And if we ignore his ERA, which was great, he really didn't pitch that well. Like this, do you view it as more of a good thing that a guy got some major league experience, even if it wasn't great, as opposed to like, does it make you doubt a guy when he has 6 shaky starts, or do you say, hey, he probably got his first little misstep out of the way, and that's almost a good thing to have learned? You know, how do you judge that like first little spurt of major league experience?
I try not to look at the stats at all when these guys come up in such small, like his ERA could probably has people drafting him. I don't even know where he's being drafted. Probably higher than Chandler.
He's going later than Chandler. He's like in the 500s. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That surprised me after that ERA. I feel like people would see that ERA and kind of jump all over it. I try to not look at that, but anytime we get StatCast data on these pitchers, I feel like that is incredibly helpful because like I feel like we've already talked about, you can dominate the lower level of the minor leagues, and then it's so hard to come up and dominate against tougher competition. And so now that we have some insight into his arsenal, I feel like that's the main takeaway. The major league experience of getting your feet wet, I don't know how much I care about that in the long run. I mean, we saw Paul Skeens come up last year with no major league experience, and he did just fine. He
did fine. Yeah, fine is the
word. He was okay. I think I'll consider drafting him this year if he falls to maybe the 30th round or something like that. No, I don't think I care that much about that. It's more beneficial to me, though, to have more insight into what their arsenal looks like, since we don't see that in AA, and especially with so many guys skipping AAA nowadays or having really short stints in AAA. I feel like it's really beneficial just to be able to see what the upside really is. I feel like you can see a lot of that. You can see the slider metrics or whatever breaking ball that pitcher is throwing. You can see the fastball metrics. Fastball, it was so important for pitchers to be able to have a high ceiling. Very rarely do pitchers reach a high fantasy ceiling if they don't have a good fastball. And so just being able to compile all that information is, I think, really helpful to me.
Yeah, I think I do care about it. I do think that a prospect getting his feet wet and getting experience at the major league level is important, just on like not a statistical thing, but on the emotional side. Like the nerves of a prospect have to be come into account when they only make 2 or 3 starts and they kind of feel like they're pitching for their job. So when a guy like Lauder gets a shot next year to be in the rotation, I think that kind of like, okay, I'm pitching for my job aspect is kind of taken out of it, and he can kind of settle in and not relax, but kind of feel like he has some security in his position that maybe you wouldn't get if it was like a 3 or 4 game stint.
Yeah, I think it's important too to consider what your expectations are of the pitcher. So with Lauder is not a high upside play in any way, shape, or form. He's a pitch to contact guy. He throws a lot of strikes. He's got that very high safe floor that you're kind of looking for as a rotation stabilizer. And looking at his stats just last year in the majors, in a 38% ground ball rate, which for Lauder is so misleading because in the minors he had a 60% ground ball rate. He's a sinker guy with a heavy sink, pitches down in the zone. He's able to, suppress hard contact by, everybody's hitting the ball on the ground against him. And I think that's going to be a big thing for him playing in Cincinnati, because we know what Great American Ballpark does to pitching. And for him to have that profile of being a heavy ground ball guy, being able to, induce the weak contact, it's going to be good for him. He's not going to be a strikeout guy. If you're looking for a strikeout guy with Louder, you're picking the wrong guy. You're looking for the innings. You're looking for the good ratios. He throws a lot of strikes. He's going to miss some bats, but you're never going to get a strikeout rate of more than 25% off of him or out of him. So it really just goes with your expectations. Now, when Skeens came up, we knew what we were looking for. We're looking for that 35% strikeout rate. We're looking for the elite velocity, the elite bat missing. So when you're considering these prospects and your teams, it's really about your build and what you're actually looking for versus what the pitcher can bring for you. So if you're looking for strikeouts, Louder is just not your guy. So
do we think he wins a rotation spot? I don't know if they hand it to him out of spring training. I don't think they do.
No, I don't think he makes it out of spring training. I think he's probably the next guy they call if a guy at the back end of that rotation goes down, or if like a spot opens up for whatever reason. But I do think that he will get more than 6 starts in the majors this year, just because Abbott has injury history. I think Singer does too. Like if
Lodolo does.
Lodolo does too, yeah. So like there's going to be innings that need to be eaten by somebody, and I think Loader in that system right now is the most major league ready and has the highest floor. And obviously, like Martin said, not a huge strikeout guy, but for real baseball, like he is a guy you want on the mound. Like he's a dog. He will get you wins. He will get you innings. So I think that he's going to get more than 6 starts. I don't think he's going to win the job right out of camp, though.
Oh, I'm totally on board with Rhett Louder. I think he's opening. I think he's on the opening day roster for sure.
I think they eventually move Abbott out of the rotation, because I feel like we've seen Andrew Abbott and it just hasn't worked like it worked in the minor leagues. But I don't think they give it to him in spring. Now Lodolo could easily get hurt in spring training. I feel like there's a pretty good chance that can happen, and then we end up with Rhett Louder in the rotation. But I don't know. I was looking at Louder prepping for this, and did you know his fastball and slider, his 4-seam and slider, he throws at a 36 and 33 degree arm angle, and then his changeup and sinker he throws at a 27 degree arm angle. Like that's a massive difference. I don't know if I have not done any research into whether the variation in your arm angle plays a huge impact. I'm not sure if anybody else has looked into that, but I feel like that could be really significant if you can basically narrow it down between his arm angle to 2-pitch mix every time. If it's low, it's changeup or a sinker. If it's high, it's a 4-seam or a slider. I thought that was fascinating when I was looking at his profile that he does that.
I feel like Matt looked deeper into Rhett Louder than I did. That was good stuff. give me a little of that instead of a little of that. I like it. Hey, something else to mention. If you're watching and want to drop names in the chat, I'll kind of write them down. If they don't come up organically, I'll bring them up later. So if there's someone you want to ask about, I am keeping my eye on the chat.
Here, Dave, I'll help you out. I'll throw a name out here because I know he's controversial. Let's start with Chase DeLauder. Yeah, let's talk about him too. Let's talk about Chase Dolander is what I'm talking about. So Dolander, obviously the premium prospect for the Rockies right now. Not that premium prospects running that organization very well. But Dolander
high praise, really.
It is right.
Hard list to get to the top of.
All right. As my good friend Jeff Erickson would say, they eat paste in the corner. It's fine. So Dolander was special. Like Dolander was Skeens before Skeens became Skeens, right? So Dolander was the prime pitcher in NCAA in 2022. Came out, struggled a little bit in 23, got bounced around a little bit. Meanwhile, Skeens just comes in and blows the doors off the place, right? Dolander's got a legit 4-pitch mix, fastball, curveball, slider change. He's got elite stuff, but he's going to pitch in Colorado. So we got to take into account what he's going to lose by pitching in Colorado. With that said, I'm not the only person that feels this way, but I think Dolander is one of the guys that can get away with pitching in Colorado. I think his stuff is elite enough. I think he's an elite talent. And honestly, I think they said they're going to give him a shot to compete for the rotation going into spring training. I find it very, very difficult to believe that they won't let him have full reign come opening day and be the.
Do you know the Rockies organization? Do you know the Rockies organization?
I know, but he's just so talented. And I'm a huge Dollander believer. He's a top 5 pitching prospect for me. I know the organization's terrible. I know that they do things completely backwards, but I just believe in the arm and I believe in the player. So
it keeps him a tier below for me. Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it keeps him like he would be up there with Chandler. He'd be up there with Job. He would be in that top tier, but instead I have him below Thomas White. I have him more in a Tink Hence kind of like tier where it's like could be really good, could blow up my fantasy team. Like
that one hurts my soul.
The talent is there, but when was the last time Colorado had a reliable starting pitcher for fantasy? Like, and that it worked out. I mean, we're focused, I guess, really on 2025, but that it worked out year over year, even from a dynasty perspective. They'll have guys that'll maybe come up once in a while, but it's just that park is so difficult and that organization is so difficult to trust that I feel the same way about Sean Sullivan, and who's a lefty pitcher in their organization right now. It's like both of them look dominant in their first year last year. Dollander has better stuff, but I think Sullivan, you could argue, has a higher ceiling or higher floor than Dollander does. But I can't put either one of them up in a higher tier knowing that they're going to have to pitch in Coors Field. Like that terrifies me.
Yeah, I go back and forth on Dollander. One, because whatever the rational decision is to be made for the Rockies, they typically go with the opposite and completely self-sabotage themselves. So I don't know how they'll handle Dollander. I would expect them to try and not force him, but give him every opportunity to like you said, win the job. But there's also the other side of me, where even if he doesn't have a good spring and doesn't look like the Dollander we know, they're going to still try and force him out there, and it could end up ruining him long term. The other thing I'm looking at with Dollander is the strikeouts are great. The walk rate won't kill him, but he did have 40% fly ball rate in the minors. And obviously, last year, I think he only had a 2.2% of those fly balls left the ballpark in AA, but in Coors Field, a lot more of those are going to get out. So I think it kind of boosts his ERA projections a little bit for me, but I think Martin hit the nail on the head. He is he has the build and the stuff and the results in the minor leagues to really be a true front of the line guy. But one, the organization, and two, the location take him, like Matt said, just a little bit below what I think he could be if he was pitching in another organization.
I feel like we all talked about being a little bit risk averse in redraft leagues to pitching prospects, and that's how I feel. I in a redraft league, unless I had, like I mentioned, an incredibly deep bench or something, I wouldn't even consider taking him this year, just strictly because if we're going to talk about risk averse or injuries or how much playing time are they really going to get at the major league level, I feel like Dollander has all the normal pitching risk plus the Coors Field pitching risk, and I wouldn't consider him for a redraft league. I mean, Dynasty, call your shot. And it's he could be the best pitcher in baseball. He has that kind of stuff. I feel like, Martin, like you said, he has just top tier stuff, but I don't think I would bank on him in 2025 anyway.
No, I wasn't if it came off and I was insinuating you should roster him in 12 or 15 team right now in redraft, I would not do that. I will take him in a draft and hold though all day long, and I've got him in 2 or 3 leagues. I have no problem with him at all because I really do feel like he's going to produce viable innings this year, and he does have the stuff, in my opinion, to overcome the Coors Field effect. So
he's the perfect guy for a draft and hold, where you can just start him on the road. Even if he pitches for 3 months and he just wait until he pitches on the road, and you'll get a few good starts with strikeout upside.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not going to mess.
Yeah. It's do you want Chase Dollander pitching on the road, or do you want Tyler Anderson pitching at all? Kind of
right.
thing.
Yeah. That's where, by all means, go for the guy who might be good. This is the guy that is not good.
Tyler Anderson catching strays on our pitching prospects.
You earn them. You earn them.
Poor guy, man, and he's watching too. That is disappointing.
All right, Tyler.
You just lost us a donation right there. So someone in the chat asked about Brandon Sproat, who was on my list. And I want to ask you guys something about him, kind of as the inverse of Bubba Chandler. The reason I love Bubba Chandler is small sample size. I only know to look at these stats. And when he went from AA to AAA, if anything, he got better. Like his strikeouts went up by like 5% in AAA. Like when you can go up a level without losing anything, much less gaining something, that opens my eyes. Whereas Sproat, who's a Mets prospect, had a 33% strikeout rate at AA and went up to AAA. He only had 7 starts, but the strikeouts dropped to 16%, and the swinging strikes dropped in half. To me, that's scary. I don't know if I'm overreacting to 7 starts at AAA. And one of you guys mentioned earlier how a lot of guys seem to be skipping AAA. To me, like it's super important to see what they do when they go up that next level. And it scares me off a guy when there's that significant of a drop off level to level. Am I overreacting in general and or with Brendan Sproat?
I don't necessarily think you're overreacting, but I think it's more looking at how his stuff graded out. I mean, his fastball wasn't good. It did not grade. I mean, if you use PLV, he threw the pitch 50.2% of the time in AAA, and he doesn't get any induced vertical break on it. It's like 12.5 inches, which I think is really concerning in today's day and age where everybody likes a high rising fastball. His doesn't rise. He doesn't get good extension on it. The velocity is pretty good, 96.6. So I think it's kind of a combination of, the strikeout rate drop, but the fastball, which is his biggest pitch, also did not grade out well at all. I do think that fatigue could have been a little bit of it. I think I could be wrong here, but I think he dealt with some injuries in his collegiate career. It looks like he topped out at 106 innings. And so last year he went to 116 in his first professional season. So I don't know if fatigue necessarily could be part of his numbers really dipping down toward the end of the year. I feel like a professional season and the tax that it takes on your arm has to be way different than whatever endurance and stress you put on your arm in college. And so I feel like that could potentially be part of it, but the fastball grading out poorly was really, really concerning to me. And as he kind of shot up everybody's lists, he kind of shot back down real quick. And so he settles toward like the back end of my top 100, where a lot of pitching prospects with some big question marks or limited upside kind of land for me.
Yeah, I think Sproat's biggest problem was he just didn't adjust well to AAA, and whether it was injury or fatigue or whatever the case may be, his 7-game sample was not pretty at all. But we've seen guys that have struggled initially at levels that got better as it goes along, and that's not uncommon for young players. It's a big adjustment when you're settled into a place and then all of a sudden, you're moving into somewhere else. And we got to remember they're still young adults. They're still trying to figure out life as it is, let alone pitching at a high level. So he didn't adjust well. With that said, I'm not the biggest Brandon Sproat fan. I think he's going to be a nice back end of the rotation type arm. I know some people view him higher than that. But I think that the 7-game sample is enough to definitely scare me a little. I want to see how he reacts in response this year at the start of the season in AAA. But I think that outcome that he had last year is enough to keep him kind of on the back end of the radar for someone that would debut later in the season versus coming up earlier in the season like it looked like he would have if he would have taken his sample up until like the end of July last year. So I'm not putting a ton of weight into a 7-game sample. That's just my personal preference. I think especially like Matt said, fatigue could have been involved. He did deal with a lower body thing. So I think that definitely played a role, but there's some numbers here that do stick out and do raise some major red flags. The home run rate between AA and AAA basically doubled, both the percentages and the per nines. That tells me that he's struggling to deal with hitters at a higher level, more talented hitters once he gets closer to AAA in the majors. And his whiff rate, I think cut in half between AA and AAA.
So he wasn't getting guys to swing and miss, which is one of the things that you are obviously looking for a starting pitcher to do in fantasy is get Ks. That got cut in half. And that combination to me kind of tells me that maybe he's dominant at the lower levels against less talented hitting and will struggle against major league caliber players.
Yeah, I feel like his fastball percentage was, I think if you combine like the four seam, the cutter, and the sinker, it was almost 70% fastball, which I feel like is kind of what we've started to talk about. You can get away with just a good fastball, or even in Spurt's case, I guess a mediocre fastball against lower level hitters. But then once you start getting up to those better, more advanced competition, the hitters are on your fastball and can do damage with that home run rate that Jack kind of pointed out.
Yeah, it's like the Owen White theory. So Owen White just got DFA'd for the second time this offseason by, I think it was the Reds this time, but he was the same way. He carved up low A, high A, and then as soon as he got to double A, he started hitting, a little bit more experienced hitters. He just ran out of steam and just didn't have it anymore. So I wonder, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen with Sprout, but there are guys that thrive against less quality hitters. And then when they get up against the big boys, it just doesn't mesh for them. So,
yeah. We had someone ask about Mizorowski. Is that the guy in chat you were saying is just going to be a reliever?
I'm not positive he is. Yeah, he's on Milwaukee. I know there's been rumors or buzz from a lot of their beat reporters that he's just going to be a reliever. I think in 2025 he will be. I think I buy that. So if you're drafting him this year, but we've seen this before with Milwaukee. We saw Corbin Burns. They used him as a reliever, and then they moved him into the rotation after he got his feet wet at the major league level. We saw Freddie Peralta. He got used out of the bullpen, and then they moved him into the rotation after he got his feet wet. I mean, we saw them use DL Hall kind of in a similar way, and I was never necessarily in on DL Hall, but use him as a reliever, move him into the rotation, maybe 6 in the rotation. So I feel like we've seen Milwaukee do this. I think if you're counting on him in 2025, though, I think it'd be silly to expect a lot of starts from Mizorowski.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the three arms that you did in their organizational history, because Burns and Peralta and then DL Hall, if you really look in, Burns and Peralta are more similar than they are to DL Hall, just based on command and control. And that's where Mizorowski struggles. His arsenal is fantastic. If he could figure out how to cut his walk rate down, even to 7 or 8%. I mean, we're talking, he's got that kind of stuff that could be up there with the Painters, the Jobs, the Chandlers, but he's got no idea where it's going. And it's terrifying because his stuff really is that good. And for me, I've been out on him for quite a while now. I don't buy the command and the control. I don't think it's going to come. And if he can get it to work in spurts like he has, then he's the perfect high leverage potential piece in a bullpen. He could become what Mason Miller is for the A's just because he's got that kind of stuff. I don't see him being a starter at any point in his career. They may try it just to try it, but he's more DL Hall than he is Corbin Burns and Freddie Peralta.
Yeah, I lean more to agreeing with Martin. I'm kind of out on Mizorowski. I think he has about as high of a reliever risk as you can have when it comes to a starting pitching prospect. So I think especially in 2025, like he's going to be a relief option. Like maybe if the bullpen shakes out in a way where maybe he's an option for like saves and becomes like a high leverage reliever. But like I don't see him getting into the starting rotation this year. I'm also a little scared off just because of like the build. 6'7", 190 he's not very built. Like he's not a big guy. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me. Like maybe there's some future injury risk down the line. So I think at least for the short term, purely reliever risk, but maybe down the line, like Matt said, like they have a track record of.
Did you say 6'7", 190? I'm just
he is 6'7",
getting that through my head. That's some wild stuff.
He does not have a lot of meat on those bones. So.
Yeah, I'm like a 5'11", 190. I feel like I'm about normal size. I don't even know what that means. I'm trying to. I gotta meet this guy. All right.
Just think of a flagpole with arms, Dave.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm rooting for him. So someone I for sure want to hear your opinions on is Kumar Rocker, because the numbers are so fascinating to me. Like those minor league numbers were essentially like he pitched just a couple starts at every level and just struck essentially everybody out. Like, one, what do you think about him, and what do you do with those like freaky good numbers? But also in general, like, how many starts do you need to see for it to matter? Like, when a guy gets, well, I don't even know what it was, like 5 starts and 6 starts here and just striking everybody out and then moves up. Like, how do you even evaluate that?
Rocker's really hard, to be honest with you, because there's such an interesting history with him. I mean, he as a true freshman, he struck out 18 guys in a game with throwing no hitter in super regionals. He was the guy. Him and Leiter together in Vanderbilt were just electric. And then he comes out and he gets drafted, and then he fails the medicals, so he goes to independent ball. He's brutal in independent ball, but there's still the talent there. So the Rangers grab him, and it's shoulder surgery, and then it's Tommy John surgery. And he comes back, and I, as a prospect guy, I hadn't given up on him, but he was off the radar because he was gone for so long. And then he comes back, and it's just like guns blazing. This guy is just, mowing guys down. I mean, his slider could already be the best slider in major leagues. I mean, it's that good. It's 80 grade. But to answer your question about sample size, with Rocker, I need to see more. I need to see more because he's got the injury history. He's had some flub ups with his mechanics that have caused him to get really out of sorts, especially when he was in the independent circuit. I need that repeatability that I talked about earlier with his mechanics. I need to see that he's overcome that, because if he's overcome that and you buy the gains that he's made with his command and control, you shouldn't doubt his talent. His talent's there. He's already had the surgeries. He's already been elite at certain levels. I mean, he's shown to be an elite pitcher in the minor leagues. So if he comes out in the spring and looks the part and looks like he's healthy and that he's mechanically sound, he's a top 50 starting pitcher if he can get a rotation spot, if not higher. So
yeah, I'm right there with Martin. I think that the injury history is a major red flag. Also, the walk rate, like quadrupling when he made it to the majors, also kind of scares me. He also got hit really hard when he in the majors last year. Like, his average exit velocity was close to 90. His hard hit 47.1% of his balls in play were hard hit, and the walk rate was really high. So there are major red flags. I would like to see probably another 10 to 15 starts before I can say one way or the other if I think he's going to be good or not. But right now, I'm kind of more out than I am in on Rocker.
I tend to lean with Jack when it comes to Rocker. The lack of depth in his arsenal, and it's hard. You put an emphasis on depth, and then Spencer Strider comes up, and it's like, well, you don't really need depth if you have pitches that are good enough to get by with the fastball slider combination. But that's not what I look for in a pitching prospect. And he's really fastball slider, and then he throws a sinker, but he doesn't have a changeup really. He doesn't have a curveball really. You have the injury history. You have the walk rate, like Jack mentioned. And the slider is really good, but I mean, small sample, so it's kind of hard. Like, PLV didn't actually like the slider, which I thought was interesting. It gave it I don't even know, I lost it in the small sample, like a 4.86 on it. Stuff Plus liked it, but it was a 104. Like, it's not like it was an elite slider, kind of like Jacob deGrom's. Like, I pulled up the Rangers kind of Stuff Plus last year. deGrom was a 154. Like, the models didn't love it. Not that the models speak for every pitcher. There are all kinds of anomalies and he's with opposing batters with 50% of the time on the slider. So clearly he was doing something right with the pitch, but I'm not sure that it's good enough from a stuff perspective to get by with just the fastball. And that kind of concerns me long-term with him. And then the injury, you pile that in. And I don't think he's guaranteed a rotation spot in 2025. You have Bradford battling for a spot. You have John Gray is in there. Are they going to use him out of the bullpen? You have Jack Leiter still hanging around. So I don't think he's guaranteed a rotation spot. And then you add that other risk. He's another guy that I would probably be steering away from in a redraft league. He's intriguing, I feel like, from a dynasty standpoint, but he's somebody that I have no idea what I feel about him in dynasty. I don't know if I would be selling high. He's one of the more difficult guys to kind of figure out, I feel like, at this point in his career.
Yeah, for redraft, it's interesting with the redraft though with him because yeah, he's got risk, but their entire rotation has risk. Evaldi's going to get hurt. DeGrom he's going to get
he'll
hurt.
be fine. I wouldn't worry about him.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, he's completely clean injury history. Tyler Molly's coming off Tommy John. They have a love fest with John Gray. I can't see John Gray keeping Kumar Rocker out of the rotation, but there's a lot of risk involved in that rotation in and of itself. He's gonna get run at some point. It's just a matter of when.
So Job is going 290, Rocker's going 318, and Chandler's going 344. I feel like Chandler is clearly the guy that I would take at those values, but like I would much rather take Bubba Chandler around or two after Kumar Rocker.
And around those numbers you just read, the 300 range, who are the major league starters in that same range that you're going against?
The 290, it kind of honestly drops. You have Reese Olson at 274. And then Jackson Jobe at 290. I guess it's a really hitter heavy range. Mitch Keller at 311, Merrill Kelly at 312, Luis Severino 317. And then you get into the guys I mentioned before, Nestor Cortez, Brian Bello, Eric Fetty, Jesus Luzardo. And then after Chandler, it's David Festa, Tobias Myers. Like I would.
So that list you read before Chandler, I think is a good exercise. Like, would you draft? Let's say you have several pitchers. You're not drafting your SP3. Would you take Chandler ahead of Merrill Kelly, whoever you just named in that mix?
I would take him above every other person because the only person with upside I think in that range is Jesus Luzardo, and he has his own issues. And now he moves to Philly, and how is that? I thought it was a great move as a Phillies fan, but how does he work in that ballpark, which is a lot different than Miami? I think I would take him over Merrill Kelly. I'd take him over Mitch Keller. I'd take him over Luis Severino pitching in Sacramento. I'd take him over Nestor Cortez. I'd take him over Brian Bello. I would take him, I think, over Eric Fetty unless I went really high risk early in the draft, because I think Fetty could eat up a good amount of innings. But I guess that's the same with Merrill Kelly. But I think everybody else has their risks that I would much rather. Chandler's upside, I mean, we talked on this earlier in our little segment here, but I think his upside is just so high.
The one rebuttal I would have for guys in that range would be like guys like DJ Hers. Like as a Cubs fan, I was really excited about him. I was kind of sad when we traded him away. Like obviously this is talking redraft dynasty. Obviously I'd rather have Chandler and Jobe over DJ Hers, but for major league impact in 2025, I think DJ Hers is one of the more exciting options in that Nationals rotation right now. And like the StatCast numbers are good. He has a decent pitch mix. Obviously the size, he's a little smaller than what you like, but like he struck out 106 batters in almost 90 innings. The expected stats look good. So I think if you're looking for redraft pitching, I think a guy like that in that range, I'd rather take than a prospect, but that's just my personal preference.
You would take Hers over Chandler
for redraft.
Yeah.
I would probably. I also try to go hitter heavy, just because I think that there's a bigger gap between like a good hitter and a replacement level hitter than there is between like a good pitcher and a replacement level pitcher. So, personal preference, I would take a guy like Hers, who I know is going to probably get 20 to 25 starts at the major league level next season, over a guy like Chandler, who maybe only gets like 8 to 12.
Martin, break the tie. Hers or Chandler, and then it's settled.
Oh, guys.
Zach picked a good person there because Hers does have some upside. I think
it's an interesting game. Yeah,
he struck out, like he had multiple games.
He had a couple amazing games in there.
He did, but he's also got some underlying concerns as well. But I mean, Chandler definitely has the highest upside of any of the players you named in the group. Given the choice between Hers and Chandler, I'm going to take Hers just because he's got a track record in the major leagues. I love Chandler. I saw him in person, and I think he's going to be a stud in the long term. But again, we talked about risk averse. I'd rather take someone that I know at least has a rotation spot, even though Chandler should as well. But Yeah, give me hers. Sorry, Matt.
Hey,
Don't fire
geez.
me.
And Chandler or Nestor Cortez, though. I feel like that.
Oh, that's completely
Oh.
changes the argument.
Yeah, yeah, no.
Well, he's going ahead of Bubba Chandler.
It's definitely Nestor Cortez. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, no. Give me Nestor all day.
We got just a couple minutes left. Real quick, I feel like somebody mentioned Thomas Harrington in passing. Any interest in him? To me, he's kind of I love seeing a low walk rate. I don't just looking at stats, I don't see an immediate huge ceiling. Do you think does he get into the rotation early on for Pittsburgh?
Not early, no.
I don't have any. I feel like Harrington's name's popped up a lot this offseason. I've seen it, and I think he's just a high floor guy, which is
I think
fine.
that's why the names popped. Like he looks to me like he'd probably be fine. And some of these guys look like they might be terrible or they might be good.
I think that part of the obsession with Harrington is just what the Pittsburgh Pirates have done with their pitching development of late. I mean, you look at obviously Skeens is a generational talent, but Jared Jones was headed down that reliever risk path as well prior to 2024 and just came out and just was really good for a while and then kind of tailed off. But and then you've got Chandler, who was a converted infielder that they converted into a pitcher. He's only been in the, in the minors for 2 years as a pitcher and is now one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. You've got Harrington, you've got Braxton Ashcraft. I mean, their org is really developing high-end talented prospects. And I think that some of that helium is coming from their recent track record of success.
Yeah. So we're about out of time. If you haven't already done it, if you can donate, please do. This is a great cause, and it's awesome to sit around and talk about baseball for an hour, 4 days. But if you can donate, please do. Yeah. Any of you guys got any names we didn't mention that you're like, hey, we got to say this name before we do
Quinn Matthews. Yeah.
Okay.
Quinn Matthews. I also want to throw out Kate Horton just because like the Cubs don't have it like that. The back end of that Cubs rotation right now is ugly. Like that is a lot of guys that is. I'm a Cubs fan and I can say it. That is not a high upside group in the back end of that Cubs rotation right now. Obviously, the health is a massive factor with him, and it requires him to stay healthy for a prolonged period of time, which he's had trouble doing. But like the slider is one of the best in minor league baseball. The fastball still got good velocity. He hasn't shown the durability, but if he can find that, I think he could probably break into that rotation by the middle of May or June.
I feel pitcher list Discord plug. Like we were just talking about Horton the other day, and it's like he is fascinating, and it's so hard to even rank him from a top 100 kind of standpoint. Like, what is that shoulder? How much of his poor numbers last year was a shoulder injury? Is he healthy now? There has been such little information I feel like about Horton. Like I'm fascinated to see him in spring training because we were talking like he could be a top 20 prospect in a month. And no, I would not, like a month into the season, I would not be surprised at all. He could also be the 200th best prospect in baseball, and that would not surprise me at all. Like, I think he could definitely debut next year if everything clicks.